One of the things that makes me happiest in life is to be a part of the West Side Church family and to have opportunities like this where we come together to worship God and sing these wonderful songs of praise. We're indebted to Michael Brooks for his leadership in our singing this morning, and how much I appreciated the good prayer that Brother Bill Oldham led us in. We're fortunate to have men like Bill who have preached the gospel for many years, been involved in Christian education as a teacher at Harding for a long time. Bill is a special friend and a special encouragement to me, and I appreciate him so much. I'm grateful that he has family members here with him today. And Jeff Massey, thank you for your thoughts as we've gathered around the Lord's table this morning. We appreciate Jeff and Holly and their children. Well, I hope you've had a good week, and I hope the week that is about to proceed will be a good week for you as well. Tammy and I are looking forward to a trip tomorrow to North Carolina to visit our daughter and two granddaughters there, as well as her mother and family members, and we're looking forward to that. We'll be gone through next Sunday and arrive back next Sunday night, Lord willing. I wanted to mention briefly this morning, the office was closed this past week, so there's no family news today, but we have had two couples in the last week or so who have had additions to their families. And I wanted to mention that Adam and Hannah Pankey have a new baby, as well as John and Dina Reynolds. So congratulations to both the Pankeys and the Reynolds on the birth of their new babies. And I will wait and let Rachel get all of those wonderful, magnificent details about weight and height and eye color and hair color and toe length and all of those other things, and put those in the family news for us next week. But we rejoice with these two families. And I do also want to mention this morning, we have two couples who are celebrating special anniversaries this week. John and Joanne McAdams are celebrating 56 years of marriage on Thursday, and Tom and Carolyn Winberry will be celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary on New Year's Day, January 1st. That'll be Wednesday. So congratulations to both of these couples. We appreciate them so very, very much. Dr. L.C. Sears was the dean of Harding College for many, many years, back prior to the name change to Harding University. When I was a student, I had the opportunity to get acquainted with Dr. Sears. He was in the latter years of his life, a very old man at the time, but I enjoyed so much getting acquainted with him and visiting with him. He lived in an old stone house that was located right on campus. In fact, where the Thornton Education Building is today is where Dr. Sears' house was. And he and his wife lived there, I guess, all of their, up until they died. But one of the things I remember about him was his writing. Dr. Sears was a professor of English. He had received a PhD from the University of Chicago. And he wrote several books. He wrote a biography of his father-in-law, J.N. Armstrong, entitled For Freedom. And then he wrote an autobiography that he entitled, What is Your Life? What is Your Life? I have signed copies of both of those books in my library, and they're very precious to me. And it's that second book that I want to use as the title for my message this morning, the last message of 2019 on Sunday morning. What is your life? Think about it. You ever find yourself wondering what you're going to do tomorrow? Does life ever get boring? Do you ever find yourself looking for some adventure? I thought about that as I read the story this past week of a man named Lawrence Walters of San Pedro, California. Several years back, Lawrence Walters was sitting around his house when he decided he was bored. He wanted some adventure in his life. He wanted to do something. So Lawrence Walters came up with an idea. He took 42 helium-filled weather balloons and tied them to a Sears lawn chair, anchored it, sat down in it, strapped himself in, and then let go of the anchor. Fortunately, he had enough forethought to carry a pellet pistol with him, with which he planned to shoot the balloons for his descent. Lawrence Walters was surprised when, rather than floating gently above the rooftops of his neighborhood, he soared to over 10,000 feet in altitude. That surprised him. Not only did it surprise him, but it surprised the pilot of a Southwest Airlines jet, who radioed to air traffic control, there is a man floating up here in a lawn chair. Wouldn't you just love, wouldn't you just love to have heard a conversation in air traffic control that day? There's a man floating up here in a lawn chair. Well, at 10,000 feet, you lose your breath and you lose that atmosphere. And fortunately, Walters had enough presence of mind to take the pellet pistol and start shooting the balloons and began his descent. 45 minutes later, he landed safely in Long Beach, California. The guy's a nut. I mean, what kind of guy straps himself in a lawn chair and goes into the atmosphere? It's crazy, I'm telling you. But James reminds us in his little letter in the New Testament that some of the plans and preparations we make in life are no less crazy than what Lawrence Walters did on that July 2nd day some years ago. Listen to what James says in James 4, verses 13 through 15. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a city, stay for a year, do business, and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be tomorrow. Your life is a vapor that appears for a little while and vanishes. Wherefore you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. Oh, such practical advice at the end of one year and the dawning of a new one. I think there are three considerations in these verses that each of us must be aware of. And the first of these is that we do not know what our life will be tomorrow. None of us does. We do not know what our life will be tomorrow. About this time every year, I make a trip to Walmart or Office Depot or Staples, somewhere, one of those places, and I purchase a day planner. I've done this for years. I purchase a day planner. Many of you do the same thing. And I write in that day planner all of the appointments that I have for the coming year. Some of them will be preaching appointments. I occasionally am asked to speak in a meeting somewhere, or maybe address a lectureship at some college or some other place. Now, I'll write those down in my day planner. Sometimes I write down important dates. I write down dates of my grandchildren, my children. I remember my wife's, thankfully, pretty well, because she's just 4 days younger than me. But I write down important dates. And I write down times that I know I'm going to be gone, if I've got something coming up. And many of you do the same things. We make appointments for doctor's visits. We call and ask for an appointment. They say, come in 2 weeks from Thursday. Or maybe they say, well, the doctor is out and can't see you for a month. And so we make an appointment a month later or whatever it may be. Look, James is talking about people who are doing the same thing. He's talking about people who are scheduling their time. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow. Time. He's talking about people who were scheduling their location. Today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a city. I'm in Searcy today. Lord willing, tomorrow night, I'm going to spend the night in Cookeville, Tennessee. Then Tuesday, I'm going to be in North Carolina. Going to be out there until next week. Come back next Sunday. Tammy and I plan on stopping again in Cookeville, going to church with Eric and Tracy Smith next Sunday morning. Those are our plans, our location. We plan our activities. He talks about those who plan to stay a year and do business and make a profit. But folks, let me tell you, all of these plans that we make and all of the plans that you've got for the coming year are based upon one presupposition, and that is that tomorrow is going to come for you. And it may not. It may not. Let me share 3 tomorrows. It was a Thursday, April 13th to be exact, in the city of Washington, D.C. A party was being planned, a great festive party. Flowers filled the White House. It was a jubilant occasion. Banners were being hung to welcome a national hero. In the city, bonfires burned on street corners. People reveled in the streets because America's bloodiest, most brutal, fierce, terrible war had come to a close. And the city was ready to celebrate the man who had received the surrender of Lee's army of Northern Virginia, Ulysses S. Grant. In the White House, President Lincoln, for the first time in his administration, was feeling a sense of relief. No longer was he being bombarded by the newspapers and other politicians who were calling him things like an ape or like a buffoon of a president. And in his moment of relaxation, Lincoln talked to his wife Mary and said, "You know, I should think that I would like to get out tomorrow night and go to a play." April 14th, Good Friday, as Lincoln sat in the box of Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., John Wilkes Booth made his way past guards and fired the bullet that bored its way into Lincoln's brain and changed history forever. The party for Grant never happened. But I have another one for you. 76 years later, a young couple, recently married, was setting up housekeeping in their first apartment. They were so thrilled that their first assignment was in a beautiful tropical paradise where the ocean breeze blew constantly and they could enjoy romantic sunsets at the beach of a place called Pearl Harbor. It was December 6, 1941. They decorated their apartment for Christmas. They were so excited. They had a romantic evening together. They were going to sleep in Sunday morning. And yet Sunday morning, the world was turned upside down. No one saw it coming. The Japanese invaded and bombed Pearl Harbor, destroying much of America's Pacific Fleet, killing thousands. Some of you remember that day. One more. It was a Monday evening in New York City. 12 investment bankers were on a conference phone call discussing the merger of a corporation that would affect not only their lives, but the lives of thousands of people throughout this country. All of the details had been worked out. The only thing left was the signing of the papers. The meeting was scheduled for 1 o'clock the next day. On the 100th floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center. One of the men said, "I'm sorry, I have an appointment. Can we move the meeting to 8 o'clock in the morning?" And that morning, those 12 men rode the elevators to that office. None of them returned. You do not know what your life will be tomorrow. None of us does. I don't. You don't. Number two, your life is like a vapor. Notice how James describes us. Here in verse 14, he says, your life is a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes. That word vapor is from the Greek word atmos. Atmos. We get the word atmosphere from that. Atmos. It's translated differently in different versions of Scripture. Some versions translate it vapor, like the New American Standard. Some translate it mist. Your life is like a mist. Others will translate it as a puff of smoke, or even one that I read of, a wisp of fog. Here one moment, gone the next. That's your life. I want you to think of something. Think of people you know, and I know, who were here at the same time last year. In this community, in this church, who are no longer here. Some of them, yes, some of them were older, and some of them had illness. And it wasn't totally unexpected. My wife lost her dad this past year, in late March. It was not unexpected. He had been ill for over a year. We knew his condition was declining rapidly. When the end came, it didn't really catch us totally off guard. But think about people you know who lived and worked among us, who went to their jobs every day, whether it was teaching at the university or working in a factory or traveling as a sales rep, who went on were living their life just like you and me, going through the normal routine until they heard the diagnosis from the doctor, you have cancer. Or until The accident occurred. You're saying, preacher, you're being morbid. No, I'm not. I'm being realistic. Because, folks, this is life. This is your life. And this is my life. And there will be those of us, and I include myself in that number, who are sitting here this morning who may not be in this building at this time next year. You do not know what your life is. It is a vapor. It is here one moment, and it is gone the next. Many years ago, there was a well-known gospel preacher. His name was T.H. Sherrill. T.H. Sherrill preached here in Searcy at the downtown church way back in the 1940s, early 50s, back when the downtown church was located over in what is now the Walgreens parking lot. That's how far back that is. T.H. Sherrill left Searcy and moved to Newport and preached for the Holden Avenue Church, where I served as the preacher back in the 1990s. But Sherrill was loved in that community. I mean, he didn't drive. He didn't even own a car. But he just walked everywhere he went. And I mean, the people in that community loved him, and he loved them. And he just worked, and that church grew. And then one Sunday, he got up without any forewarning whatsoever. He taught his regular Bible class. He preached his morning sermon, went out with some friends for dinner. Then he preached a funeral sermon that afternoon. Then he came back to church, preached that night, went back to the preacher's house right across the street from the church building, sat in his chair, collapsed of a heart attack, and died. What is your life? It is a vapor that appears for a while and then vanishes. Third, James reminds us that God is the one who is calling the shots, not you. God is in control. Whereas you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will go to such and such a place and do this or that. Do you know what you will never hear God say? Oh, I didn't know that. You'll never hear a gasp come from heaven. Really? Well, I'm certainly surprised. You'll never hear God say that. God is the one who is in control. He knows our coming. He knows our going. He knows the day of our birth. He knows the day of our death. And He knows every day in between. So what should we do? We must plan expediently. James is not advocating haphazard planning. James is not saying we shouldn't make plans to do as much as we can do. James is just simply saying this. As you're looking ahead in your life, you realize the importance of God, number one. God. It's not about your plans. It's not about your vacation. It's not about your trip. It's not about making the money. It's God. Number one. That's first. That's what James is saying. And secondly, he is saying, make every day count. Don't live your life for the future. Live it now. Make today count. I heard this story recently that touched my heart of a man in his 70s who went to the bedroom that he and his wife shared. And he went to her dresser. He opened the bottom drawer, and in the bottom drawer of the dresser there was a box, a beautiful white box. And He opened up the box and pulled out a beautiful silk slip, woman's slip. It was silk, soft, lace, beautiful lace. He had bought it for her years earlier when they were on a trip to New York City. She said, "Oh, this is so beautiful. It's much too special for me to wear every day. I'm going to put it aside for a special occasion." As he took it out of the tissue paper, he laid it on the bed and thought to himself, "I guess this is the special occasion." As he laid it beside the other clothes he was preparing to take to the funeral home. Parents, love your children today. Young people, put God first today. Older folks, set that example of faithfulness today. May all of us give God our best today. Will you come while we stand and sing?